I'm Matt Hitchin. I'm moderating this panel on trust in AI, how we get to the next layer of trust in our technology. And I have a great panel here. I'm going to have them each introduce themselves very quickly. We'll go down the row, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Thank you. I'm Azar Bistavros. I am a professor of computer science and associate provost for the Faculty of Computing and Data Sciences at Boston University. That faculty is a new school, if you want to call it that is really focused on interdisciplinary, how AI connects with other disciplines and various sectors.
My name is Robert Mahari. I completed a JD PhD program at MIT and Harvard Law School, and now I help run a research group at Stanford that sits between the law school and the computer science department. I also spend a lot of my time advising law firms, and trust, as you might imagine, is really critical when we're thinking about AI adoption in legal practice. So excited to speak with you guys about that today.
Hello, I'm Ramesh Raskar, professor at MIT, and I'm also founder of Project Nanda, which is an effort to create the internet of AI agents and creates the whole foundation, including trust, identity, and authentication for AI agents.
Hi, Charles Chang. I'm Deputy Dean of Academics at the International School of Finance at Fudan University, also the founder and director of the FinTech Research Center. And we work on bridging. We work on knowledge sharing and knowledge transfer. And again, hope to learn a lot today.
Hold on to that, Mike. We'll start down there. So I'm going to start with just quickly the trust in AI. Give me 30 seconds on the biggest issues you see in your practice or in your field about trust in AI and the challenges in the next.
The challenges we see are all around collaborations. I think if we go down a path, each of our own means, we've seen critical technologies take us down very, very disturbing roads in the past. And this time with AI, we're trying to find solutions that lead to collaboration, that lead to global level engagement, and lead to a humankind level governance. So that's what we're seeing in terms of challenges.
Matt, if I look at AI agents, most organizations are thinking about AI agents as an intranet of AI agents. They remain within the trust boundaries of an organization, and they're solving it within a traditional mechanism. But if you want to build the internet, an internet is a scary place. And, who you are, what have you done before, what's your reputation, who have you delegated the trust from are major issues. And unless we solve those issues, it'll be difficult to build the next internet that's based on AI and AI agents.
So in my mind, and we've been sharing our data with kind of IT vendors for decades. And usually there was no worry that those vendors would try to compete with us, right? Like at no point was a law firm thinking, oh, well, if I use Outlook, maybe one day Microsoft will launch its own law firm. Now there's a huge incentive for LLM providers to train on the data that their customers are sharing with them. And the issue there is that large language models can essentially remember the data they've seen. And you might imagine on the one hand that the LLM providers could compete directly with their customers at some point, or that sensitive insights might resurface with some later use. And so for me, kind of the key trust piece, or at least one of the key trust pieces, is how do we make sure that we can trust the providers of these large language models that are increasingly ubiquitous to safeguard the data. And ideally, we can do this in verifiable ways. And there's some interesting things in cryptography we can leverage. Maybe we'll talk about that in a bit. So, yeah.
So I have the luxury of being the head of a unit that has people from very different disciplines addressing some of the same problems. So the first thing I'll say is, how do you define trust? And who is trusting who? One thing I can tell you is it depends on who you work with. So if you are the individual perhaps worried about your data, well, do I trust my data? But do you trust the algorithm? Do you trust the recommendations? Do you trust whoever deployed that AI? It's actually not just the AI that needs to be trusted. It's who is deploying it. So a big focus, not my own research, but research done within CDS, is how to measure trust for different constituents, to the point of talking about how do people perceive trust? How do you define it? I have a faculty member who understands how to measure trust with psychology because we trust each other. We are humans. And the question is there a way to use what we know from psychology in order to develop agents that are trustworthy to the individual? So that's all.
Right. Keep the mic right there. So we're going to move to President Reagan taught us in the 80s, trust but verify. How do we verify in the new AI age?
Oh, well, great segue to the next thing I was going to say, which is you verify by measuring, by observing. So a big focus here is we'll deploy it, but we have the responsibility to develop the tools that allow those who are going to use AI to score it. So we have faculty who work on scoring ethics. We have faculty working on auditing it. So, for example, it's a black box. We don't know what's inside, but I do expect some behaviors. And these are important for me. So I'm going to define benchmarks that you run, and the benchmark will tell you something about how does it conform to your definition of ethics or trust. So it's really about measurement, benchmarking, and I know that we have things in common. I'll let you talk about the crypto keys.
Well, you have like a couple of different ways to make sure things don't go off the rails, right? One is contracts. And there's a couple of lawyers on this panel, and you make promises, and if you break your promises, we take you to court. The other one is to say, I'll do it myself, right? The only person I can trust is myself, and I'll roll up my sleeves. But you might not know how to do things, run a local LLM, that kind of thing. So then the third thing is you can try to design a technical system in a way that you have guarantees that it can't go wrong. So I'll give you one like example. I have friends who are working on this. Imagine you have this box that you put your large language model into. And essentially inside of the box, there's a key, and you get another key. And when you send your data, you encrypt it with your key. And the only place that data can ever be decrypted is in the box by the LLM with its key. No one in the world, except the LLM, can see what's going in and out of that box. And so you have this ability to, on the one hand, offshore all the maintenance of the box and the GPUs. You don't have to worry about that. Updating the LLMs, all of that is done by somebody else. But you have a guarantee that you can verify, right, cryptographically, that nothing is going to go wrong. And so there's so many solutions like this. And I think what to me is really exciting as kind of computer scientist / lawyer is that if you give us a problem, we can figure out some technical solution that can give you probably a really high degree of certainty as to like what kinds of things will go wrong, and then we measure those, and what kind of failures we can prevent completely. So, I don't know, Ramesh, I'm sure you have thoughts.
Definitely. I think if one way to think about AI agents, and I'll talk about more AI agents more than AI, is that if you want to build the internet and you want the ability to be for any agent to be able to talk to any other agent, then we can use the analogy of a browser and websites. So we build four things for the World Wide Web, which is we have a DNS that's managed by ICANN, then we have certifying authorities, then we have interoperability, and then we have attestation, like you said. So these are the four things that really have helped us build the World Wide Web. And if you have to do the same thing for the agentic web, then we need the same four things as well. So we need a new. And you can use the analogy of a stock market if you want. You want to list all the agents that are out there on some kind of a DNS ICANN-like system. Certifying authorities that are cryptographically secure, as we just heard from Robert. Then we need interoperability, and then we need attestation. Just like in a stock market, there's some interesting attestation, but there's also an extrinsic attestation, which can come from, your fundamentals and benchmarking and analyst reports and so on. So we need to build all four things just as we would build in the stock market. And only then, I think we'll allow any agent in the world to talk to any other agent, because unlike websites and web server and browsers, the agents are going to have a lot of autonomy. So they're not going to rely on human judgment, saying, hey, this looks spooky. But they just have to rely on some cryptographic methods as well as this decentralized hierarchies to deal with it.
I'm going to apologize. I'm going to go a little bit off script here.
Well, within your rights.
I'm listening to, and just, it's beyond my scope to understand, but I do feel there's so much and maybe too much focused on the how. You talk about blockchains, you talk about the internet, Is the internet a place we consider particularly trustworthy? I know Bitcoin is a low hanging fruit for me to attack, but do we view that as a trusted asset class? Um, so it occurs to me that the issue is really more who than how. I think we got the how handled. Smarter people than me are going to figure out how to do the how, and the technical machinations I think are to experts, and I trust them to do that. The part of the solution I'm more concerned with is the who. You know, we've got a lot of examples of global level challenges that we have not treated well, um, from nuclear to climate and so on. And then we have some that we have done very, very well with. You know, ozone, human genome map, you know. And as I look at it, the difference is global human commitment, right? Is how are we going to get people together to build a system that we all will buy into? And from there, we look at not just what's developing into a very bipolar AI community with two large gorillas sort of fighting it out, which scares the hell out of me, to be perfectly frank. And we got to think about how we can pivot that into a global level solution. Robert here and I had a conversation yesterday in another venue, bringing in what we call the developing nations, whether that's right or wrong, and giving them a role in this AI ecosystem so that they're part of the beneficiaries, but then also then feed back into the system as well. So to me, it's really about the who more than the how.
So I'm going to follow up on that, but just could we get reactions to that comment or say the who? I don't know who wants to go first. Ramesh.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought like the global south and how rest of the world is going to do it. Surprisingly, I feel more optimistic about the global south because, you know, there is a desire to make a distinction between kind of the business goals and the public service or public good. A good example is India with their national identity system, national payment systems, and now national DigiLocker system, which is like an equivalent of a Dropbox for every citizen. So we're working with the Indian government to see how we can launch 1.4 billion AI agents overnight, and they'll have, you know, many of the things taken care of. Your question about who is very critical, but that may be good for AI, but it's not so good for AI agents because intelligence comes from autonomy, not from automation. So autonomy requires this non-deterministic behavior, and that non-deterministic behavior unfortunately requires the how. You know, the algorithmic securities of it. Because when things are happening at a billion agent scale, you know, the who is going to be very difficult to manage. But it's just like launching a car. You know, when you launch a car, before you launch a car, you have crash tests and test tracks. You know, while you own the car, every year you have to get your, you know, inspection sticker. But every once in a while, you do an audit to see among millions of cars whether there's some cars that went wrong, and then you go and fix all the cars. So kind of you need all those three at an algorithmic level. And it's not enough to just rely on are the right people doing it.
Yeah, so this is going to be a hard pivot from my business optimism for AI, and I think, you know, the efficiency gains, especially in legal, like incredible. There's so much to be done. On the kind of social level, there are also these AI givers and takers, and I think most consumers are AI takers. And there's a trust issue, especially when it comes to AI companionship, which is a topic that I care a lot about, where people are forming these very deep relationships with AI agents, companions, meaningful relationships. I think for the first time in human history, you have a relationship that is completely one-sided and still kind of functional, right? Like you just take whatever you want from the AI. It doesn't require you to be available to it emotionally, whatever. And I worry a lot about whether we can trust those kinds of systems and essentially whether the kinds of regulations that we probably want to unlock the business value, to unlock innovation, won't also somehow make it easier to unlock things that are going to be really dark and awful. And I don't have, and I don't know, maybe we'll come up with one on this panel. I really think that the kinds of harms here are so down in the nose, right? It's not like a drug trafficking involves so many players in the supply chain. There's so many places where you can intervene. Here, I take an LLM, I wrap it in some, a little bit of prompting, And suddenly I can offer you an AI therapist, an AI girlfriend, and AI advisor who can mislead you, who can misdirect you, who can make your life worse. So who do you intervene? Who do you go after? And if you intervene, I was talking to a group of state attorney generals who are thinking about regulating this. If you intervene, what's to stop the providers from just going somewhere where they're not going to be messed with? And as this world becomes more global, I think it's going to be really hard for us to individually regulate without coordinating a little bit. So, yeah, a little bit of pessimism.
So I'm glad you brought the who. And if you remember when I started, I said, well, trust mean different things to different people. And when you talked about crypto, I love the work in how crypto it can solve problems that may seem unsolvable. But here's a challenge. I did some work similar to what you do. People sometimes don't trust you when you tell them it's mathematics. There is a human factor. I spent 2 years convincing fellow not scientists, technologists in companies that you don't have to trust me, trust math. But it's still hard. They still had me sign NDAs when at the end of the day, there is no data I'm going to see. It's all locked into the bit. So I feel the human-centered aspect of this is huge. If AI is going to be part of trading, investing, do I trust the person I'm talking to on the other side who's recommending this stock or that stock? How do we measure that? And the last point I'm going to make, you give the analogy of cars, but the roads in Africa are very different than the roads in Boston, very different than the highways in the Midwest. So when you say, well, I'll have to crash, we would need to do it in the context of where this is done.
So I'm going to go off a little off script here. So I don't know, yesterday, and if I don't know if you read the coverage, but a couple hundred yards from where we're sitting, the Prime Minister of Canada gave a big speech, well received, mostly seen as a cry to the global South to sort of take more. And it's kind of a little bit of the same. I don't know if you have comments, anyone wants to comment on it or whatever, or what it meant or what it means for technology.
Yeah, I think it's the way I heard it is we need to be in the middle. I think that's what the word.
That's what. Yeah, the middle, right? Yeah,
the middle, which is basically to say we should not take the solutions done by the mega, whether it's a country or a company. There is a middle that actually is probably the right space to be, and we need to work together now in that middle. I agree.
Which sort of parallels what we've just been talking about here. Yeah. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I think it's very. I spend a lot of time in I call it emerging South as opposed to global South, because they're really emerging in a ways that we can learn a lot from. I think Estonia was a great example, 20 years ago, of digital governance. And if you look at it now, I mean, the world GDP is about $100 trillion. Only $5 trillion of that is about in software and IT. So the remaining $95 trillion is out there. And to your point, I think just thinking about it from the mega tech companies would be doing a disservice to how the rest of the world is looking at it. At the same time, I think many of these countries have learned over time how to leapfrog. The cliched example of the skip the landlines went straight to mobile phones. My feeling, based on my partnerships and collaborations, is that they're going to skip the AI revolution altogether, the give and take problem, and go straight to the AI agents. Because, as you know, we are maybe one, maybe two breakthroughs away from these models running at about 1 million times lower compute footprint than what we have today. Even the cost of tokens is coming down by a factor of 40 per year, which means 1,600 times in 2 years and more than 1 million in 4 years. So there's a benefit sometimes to be slightly laggard, because if you just wait for 2-3 years, you get the same things at about 1 million times lower cost. And that allows you to think in completely new ways, because you don't have sunk cost. You don't have $1.4 trillion of commitment in sunk cost. And we just keep going in that track. These countries have an opportunity to start from scratch and say, hey, what if the agents start running on smartphones or laptops? That's my AI. I don't have to worry about these $1 trillion data centers that are out there.
You are good. Oh, okay. I'll just lend 2 comments. I think first, where I'm from, we think a lot about the balance between regulation and innovation.
So just tell people you're where you're from. Yeah.
Charles, I'm from China. I teach.
But that's
China,
the point. So what's the difference? How's it different
yeah,
there and
I
here?
think a lot about the balance between innovation and regulation. We understand that they're at a dichotomy. The more you regulate, the more you stifle innovation. On the other hand, if you let innovation run wild, then sooner or later it becomes unregulatable. So we think about that balance. And I think the solution that I kind of like that we've been we've been kind of trusting in on our side of the Pacific is um, this is a revolutionary tech. I think we can all agree on that. So what that means to us is, we got to do it because it's going to change the world, right? So we have to do it. But it also means 3 years from now or 5 years from now, it's still going to be here, right? We're not going to miss the train for having, delayed 18 months. So I think we really need to take a more measured and planned approach, rather than just sort of wild west at it. The consequences can be very, very big. I think as really astutely pointed out, this stuff is getting super fast, super cheap, super quick. That to me is a giant snowball rolling very quickly down a very steep hill. So as much as we can to moderate is my view.
Great. I think we only have a couple minutes. So I'm going to ask one sort of lightning round. Give me biggest surprise in trust in AI in 5 years. We come back here 5 years from now. What's going to surprise everybody in the room, everyone listening to this?
We'll still be here. That's our biggest surprise.
Yeah, I think if you remember about the internet, the green padlock, switching from HTTP to HTTPS in the late 90s changed the way we think about, how we use the internet. And the green padlock moment for the AI and AI agents is probably critical. And hopefully 5 years from now, we will have this green padlock, and that will allow us to imagine these AI agents being therapists or doctors or advisors, and the green padlock will give us that safety.
Global standard for AI regulation.
Fair.
Sir. End of SaaS is my big prediction for 2026. I think it is, like, for anyone listening out there, it has never been easier to build and deploy and experiment. And so I totally agree with what you're saying, right? Like, you don't need to be at the cutting edge. Don't train your own LLM for 99% of you. But do, like, play around with this technology. It is magical, right? And I think the fact that everybody can build their own stuff the way they want it is going to unlock so much experimentation and creativity. And I'm very excited for that. That's the app.
So I'll end it with an optimist view, which is, I think we're going to have more trust in the solutions for one reason. I'm an academic. I teach. That's my job. I think what we're noticing is society was given this thing and it's totally different, surprising. But remember that the students, high schoolers now come in. We are teaching them. They understand why they should or shouldn't trust. One of the things I always see is people are uninformed about how things work. And as a result, whatever they read in newspapers, it's scary. So then you have to build that trust for that. I think that in 5 years, a lot of this is going to go away. I think we'll be in a better place to trust and verify. I think it's really important that two pieces together.
Great.